worked with Interact for Health, who has been tremendous partners to us. They were wonderful, wonderful. And we were just recently awarded a grant, and I will let you talk about that, Mary, and then they're going to give us a check.
Well, good evening. It's exciting to see this many of you here from the community. I work at Interact for Health. It's right up the street, and we're making Thriving Communities grants. And communities have to show that they're ready to come on board with us and work for about 5 years on projects. And your group up here representing you today convinced us that they were definitely the right people, and we're really excited. And the first year is $15,000, and they've got a great plan. And I know they're looking for more people to help support the work. And we're going to be in the background watching you and sharing your successes with the rest of our region. So congratulations.
While we're doing that, some of you were looking for restrooms earlier. The women's restroom is out into, if you go out that door and to the left, it's in that back hall. Men, unfortunately, we're going to have you go upstairs to the second floor, and when you get to the top of the steps, you're going to turn left and you'll go into where it says faculty only. So I'm sorry, we didn't get the guys over to unlock it for us, so that's how we're going to have to help you tonight. And then in your packets, there are note cards, and if you hear anything during the evening that you have a question about, we'd like for you to go ahead and make a note and write your question down, and someone will be kind of up and down the aisle during the night to pick up questions, and at the end, we'll consolidate all those questions and we'll ask a few questions of our panelists.
I'd like to welcome everybody. I'm Tom Fallon. I'm a lieutenant with the Norwood Police Department. On behalf of the police department, the chief somewhere here, I think I saw him, and also the Norwood Drug and Alcohol Coalition, welcome. Our first speaker is Dr. Sean Ryan. He is a professor of emergency medicine at the University of Cincinnati, and he's also a physician specializing in addiction treatment. He is going to define the problem that we're currently facing. Dr. Ryan?
Thank you, Tom. Do I have control of this PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Again, I'm Dr. Sean Ryan. I wear a lot of hats in the community. I do work for both the University of Cincinnati as well as Mercy Health Partners. Over the past few years have refocused a lot of my clinical efforts and now back to administrative efforts on the problem that we're talking about tonight. I'm often asked to kind of give a summary overview of how we ended up in the situation where I'm sure that the majority of you that are here are tired, as I am tired, of looking on the news every day and seeing young people dying of overdose of a multitude of drugs, not just heroin. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. It's an extraordinarily complex issue that I've break up into kind of 3 pieces that I think to the general public is a good discussion. Oh, by the way, that stat is absolutely true and concerning. Obviously, the 5 people a day, and the impact of that should be that you understand that that rate is above anything except natural death, and in some counties, very concerningly, on a month-to-month basis, the rate of drug overdose, I mean all drugs led by prescription opiates and heroin, is greater than natural causes. It's really getting out of control. So this is, I have probably 1,000 graphs that I use. I speak regionally, nationally on the topic. And this is probably one of the most impactful ones for those who may have experienced previous drug epidemics. I've been more and more involved with law enforcement in the entire community. Hamilton County is broader than that. And people often bring up previous epidemics of drug abuse and what were the impact and why did we call them epidemics and such and so on. That slope is probably the most concerning way that I can portray this in a graphical format. Because and in the underlying, obviously, verbiage below it, this prescription drug abuse epidemic is responsible for more deaths than the previous, 4 to 5 times higher than the previous epidemics, which people thought were bad. And one point of clarification, again, we're talking about, when I say opioids, I mean all of them. We still have a higher rate of prescription drug-associated overdose and death than heroin. So heroin's terrible, but there's other. And I know that it's the only thing that's on the news, but it's a broader problem than that. I just want to level set with everybody. These are a few of the stats most recently seen. Some of the ODH, which is the Ohio Department of Health, as well as the Ohio Mental Health Association, that are just, and some of this stuff is from Scioto County, which I'm sure some of you are aware is one of the worst areas in the state. I think something to focus on that I already mentioned is that since 2007, unintentional drug overdoses have been the leading cause of accidental death in Ohio, beyond NBCs. And I'm a UC trauma doctor, so for 10 years I have gone into that trauma bay and seen everything you've ever heard of. And when we have a motor vehicle collision and somebody breaks something or injures something, there's a horde of people that descends upon that patient to provide services to them. In the current state of affairs, an overdose gets not 1/100th of that attention, and that's a real problem. That's why I'm here to talk to you all about this. It's going to take a broad change in the community's understanding, and then subsequently potentially public funding changing and understanding to get to the point where those same people who are at higher risk of death in the motor vehicle collision get the same resources. I'm going to give you just a brief history of heroin because I don't know that many people know what happened or how it got around. Then I'm going to talk about the 3 groups real quick: medical, social, and economic. Which of these are the 3 groups as to of a broad understanding as to why we ended up in this situation. Again, simply the medical or the changes in pain treatment and the pharmaceutical developments, which I'm sure some people are aware of. Social or the pain management expectations as a society, as well as increased opiate use in the younger population I'll talk about. And then people don't even actually often think about the economic forces that contributed to this from a very broad perspective. So heroin actually was, opium is the oldest opioid, and human opiate addiction or opioid addiction is extraordinarily old, right? They say that, I think the oldest documented utilization was 3,400 BC in Mesopotamia, so that was a long time ago we started getting addicted to this drug as a species. That little caption or picture up in the top is a Bayer pharmaceutical ad from the early 1900s when they were selling heroin as an antidote to morphine addiction, which is interesting. And Bayer it was a huge product for them, of course, because heroin sold really well. I know it's surprising to everyone that Bayer made a lot of money on that in the short term, and now it's the Mexican cartel, right? So, heroin was synthesized from morphine about 1874 by English chemists, and then, as I mentioned, the Bayer pharmaceutical situation. And then what was interesting was that morphine was broadly used in products, and a lot of it was over the counter. You go to your pharmacist and you get laudanum, which was alcohol and opiates, which is a terrible combination, but that was kind of a general tonic. Interestingly, it was historically used for hysteria, which was broadly defined as women just being upset about stuff, and then giving them laudanum to calm them down, which is a ridiculous concept. So they had a horrendous female predisposition to addiction in the early 1800s to opiates. For a long time, before my time, to be honest with you, there were decades, the medical establishment really did not treat pain with opiates. It was considered to be an extraordinarily rare case, be it terrible injury or end-stage cancer or something awful. And over the course of the 80s, we were under-treating pain. And as people that know me that are up here know that I'm one of the first guys that actually wrote a journal article in the American Journal of Public Health we had some responsibility. We, medical entities, had some responsibility in this, and I will claim some of it personally and professionally as a group. But it was this mixed endeavor where doctors were saying we're undertreating pain. They were right. We were. And actually somewhat disproportionately among the ethnic classes, we were treating inappropriately, not treating pain. And so they made a conscientious effort to try to make that change where we were more aggressively identifying and then treating pain. The problem was we didn't really have a good pain treatment at the time, and this was shoved into that, saying we're undertreating pain. What's the answer? The answer is pain meds or opiates. At that time, that's really all we had. Unbelievable low level of education made that leap. I think that people often say, well, we do need to treat pain, Sean. You don't want to, or Dr. Ron, you don't want to say you don't want to treat. Absolutely. There's a lot of pain and painful causes of things in your life, and we need to address that. But the problem for the physician is it's exceptionally hard to glean who is actually in pain and who is not, and who may be seeking and whatnot. And as I said in the Channel 12 live feed, where the judge kind of threw me under the bus and said that the doctors gave out too many drugs, I said, just so you understand, 99.9% of physicians get up every morning and try to do a good job, take care of the patients, and make sure that they're serving whatever that need might be. The unfortunate part of that is it's hard to tell, and so we do the best we can. We have a long way to go from an educational standpoint, and I'm trying to address that to some extent. What many people may not know is our contracts in many hospitals are actually tied to those patient satisfaction scores that you see, which are Press Gains. And if we don't treat people's pain, which is a question on that thing, our contracts get smacked, our bosses get mad, and we don't get paid. Or we get ditched from the hospital, depending on specialty, emergency medicine, hospitalist, or whatnot. So there's an unbelievable complex mix of pressures on the physician to take care of the patient to the best of their abilities, understand their needs and wants, the family's needs and wants. It's, answer to administration, not get in trouble with the State Board of Pharmacy and Medicine and the administrators of the hospital. I mean, it just keeps going on and on. And there are many physicians who are literally losing their mind and are describing that they're just going to quit prescribing pain medicine at all. This is happening today. There's a new bill, April 1st, where physicians are going to have to double, triple, quadruple check the system to make sure they're making the right decision. And there are large groups of primary cares who are going to stop prescribing opiates because of what is going on and this misguided, disconnected information. So it's a problem. The pharma companies, Purdue Pharma, I don't know if anybody knows who makes OxyContin, but they had a huge hand in this. They made billions of dollars off of this. They had reps who were making millions of dollars selling it to doctors, telling them there's no addiction potential, no consequences treating. Just give them the OxyContin, they'll be happy, you'll be happy, everybody will be happy, especially Purdue. They've been smacked with millions of dollars of fines associated with their behaviors because they were pushing the drugs on both the patients and the ads as well as the doctors and doing all kinds of really shady business. You can see the stat at the bottom. 2002, in 10 years, doctors prescribed 10 times more OxyContin than they had 10 years, 15 years previous. And that single drug made up 90% of Purdue's revenues. This is, again, same kind of slide, but just focusing on the fact that, as I spoke before, motor vehicles have gotten safer over the years. So starting in 1980, we've actually made a lot of advances in motor vehicle, a lot of advances in motor vehicle collision safety. And we've gone exactly the wrong direction, obviously, with prescription drug overdose. Go ahead. I've already talked about this, so I won't belabor the point. The fact of the matter is we were under-treating pain, and then the medical community got focused on fixing that, which we needed to. We just did it in a misguided fashion with some undue pressures from a lot of different directions, particularly pharmaceutical companies. And then being told, and we were educated in school, opiates have no addictive potential. This was literally told to us. Right, it's ignorant. I think that saying that, you all, this is a community, high school, middle school, obviously right here, knowing that the acceptance of drug use going up in the younger and younger populations is by no means a surprise to anybody. It's just happening. There's a lot of reasons why. I'm not going to get into that. That's its own entire conversation. The one thing I will say that the problem is the stats at the bottom are real scary. 1 in 12, ages 12 to 18 in this community have tried heroin. It is in every school, period. Every school. And the problem is their brains aren't developed. Just one quick point, the brains aren't developed at that age. And so the earlier they try it, the more consequences of addiction they have down the road. More likely to be chronic long-term addicted. I'm going to breeze through this stuff and just make a few impact points short on time. The U.S. market for illicit drugs is $100 billion a year. The U.S. market for medical devices is $100 billion a year. So for our poor, unfortunate law enforcement individuals to combat with all of their resources a market that is the size of something that J&J, Boston Scientific are going after is ridiculous. There is no way, and they know it, we've talked about it extensively, to win this from a law enforcement only component. It's got to be the whole picture. Law enforcement part, prevention, and treatment. Got to be the whole thing. $100 billion. Just one other quick point people may not have necessarily run across in their information on the subject. The Great Recession actually contributed heavily to this because of the increased anxiety and depression associated with what happened with that monetary collapse. And anxiety and depression are actually, unfortunately, kind of well treated by opiates, which is a separate conversation. But, so we were handing this drug out, people were feeling better, they were all broke, everybody got addicted. Wasn't really that I know, it's crazy, huh? Go ahead. I just want to leave this last slide. I do have one more of this slide. The ACA and parity, we are increasing the amount of patients that have access to basically Medicaid or other third-party payers that are reasonably supporting treatment modalities for this disease. So we've got some things in process. We have a lot of research to do to get better treatment modalities out there. I'm involved in a lot of it, trying to figure out what we should do better, more efficiently. You know, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a 30-day inpatient stay is not affordable to many people at all. That's not a surprise. And then there are a lot of thank goodness, although I'm not a huge fan of pharmaceutical companies, they are pouring money into this because there is a market to fix it. They'll make money off that too. I don't care as long as they do some work, right? Last slide. And I am, I'm happy to discuss or announce the fact that we will be opening a treatment center, are in the process of opening a treatment center here in Norwood in the next 30 to 60 days. And everybody can get on the website. Next.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Our next speaker is the Chief Pathologist at the Hamilton County Coroner's Office, Dr. Bill Ralston. He's got a great Norwood connection. He lived here when he went to school with Xavier. So in my position as the CIS lieutenant, I call him all the time and bug him. One of their investigators, Don Jaspers, is here, who is very good and helpful to us with all of our issues.
What's that? Sure. Thank you. Well, good evening. I'm Dr. Bill Ralston. I'm with the Hamilton County Coroner's Office. I'm the Chief Deputy Coroner and the lead forensic pathologist. With me is Don Jasper, who's also one of our death investigators who actually goes to a lot of these scenes and helps work through the death investigation. And what I'm going to talk a little bit about is statistics involving the local community. That's heroin, black tar heroin, right there in the middle. I've got a few pictures. You'll see that heroin takes many forms. Sure. So real quick, a couple of definitions. The first is what we define as manner of death. And that's basically the events or circumstances surrounding the death. And for some of the stats, you'll hear me talk about the different manners of death. We basically have five choices that we can use for manner of death. And they are natural, which is a death due solely to natural disease. Homicide, which everybody's familiar with what a homicide is. Suicide, accident, and undetermined. And so the accidental deaths are what we're going to be talking about tonight. As Dr. Ryan had said, for years, motor vehicle accidents were the leading cause of the accidental manners of death. But in Hamilton County, I guess we were a little ahead of the curve. In 2006, drug overdoses took the lead, and the trend has continued. So, another couple definitions. How do we define heroin death? Well, I define the heroin death as a drug overdose in which heroin was a major contributor. It may include other potentially lethal drugs. There may be cocaine on board, but nonetheless, heroin is there and present in an amount sufficient to explain the death. It does not include motor vehicle collisions, where somebody is under the influence of heroin. It doesn't include homicides, where somebody meets their demise while they're under the influence of heroin. Strictly accidental or suicidal deaths in which heroin was the major contributor. And in terms of the heroin deaths, I break it down a little bit further into heroin-only deaths, and that's where you have an overdose with heroin and no other potentially fatal drug level. There may be another drug on board. There may be a small amount of diazepam. There may be a small amount of alcohol, but the heroin is the only reasonable explanation for why that person is dead. And you can see that we see lots of drugs. These are just a few examples of the drugs we'll see in some of our combined overdoses, and you'll notice that on the list there's illicit drugs like heroin. There's also prescription drugs like oxycodone, fentanyl, etc. And some of these drugs actually cross over where there's an illicit form as well as a prescription form. So, we talked about manners of death, right? We've got 5 choices. Well, heroin has almost created its own little manner of death. You can see that the yellow is all the homicide deaths in 2014, 87 of them. Suicides is there in green. That's 125. Heroin is that purple piece of the pie. You see that that's 177 deaths due to heroin. You see that it outnumbers the single homicides, it outnumbers the suicides, it almost outnumbers both of them combined. The natural deaths is just slightly bigger. So heroin on its own has almost created its own manner, right? Natural includes all the cancers we see, all the myocardial infarctions we see, all the strokes we see, the seizures, etc. Homicides, that's all the gunshot wounds, stabbings, child abuse, everything we see. Suicides, all the different types of suicides, and you see that purple slice of the pie is just a death due to heroin, an accidental death due to heroin. So here's the trend, and I include fentanyl in this. You may have heard some recent talk of fentanyl. You see in 2008, heroin's a little below 40. Fentanyl's down around 5. Now in 2014, you can see the yellow bar has climbed to 177. Fentanyl is at 45. So you can see the increase over the years. And so this is the heroin deaths. This is the 177 heroin deaths, and what else was in them. 84 of those, there was heroin only. That's predominantly the majority of it. But you also see that there's a slice of the pie there, the blue slices, where you've got fentanyl involved as well. There's about 45 fentanyl and heroin combined cases. And interestingly, if you will, of these cases where we have fentanyl or fentanyl and heroin, there's a percentage of these cases where the historical information seems to indicate that the person suspected they were doing heroin and had no knowledge of fentanyl. Now, there's no way to know for certain. We can't get the full story from what that was going through that person's mind, but based on information that we received in the history gathering portion of our investigation, it seems to indicate that they were suspected to be taking heroin. And so the point is, we don't know what's in that little chunk of material. It may just be heroin, but it may also be fentanyl. And we don't know where that translation is getting lost. Okay? But there's the presence of both of those drugs, and we just don't know when those two drugs are being combined, if you will. Some more statistics. Our office handled 1,073 total cases. In other words, we assume jurisdiction. We get over 4,000 death calls a year. So we took jurisdiction of about 1,073. Of that 1,073, 177 total heroin deaths. So that's, you can do some quick math, and you're about a little under 20% of nothing but heroin. 84 of those 177 were heroin only, 46 were heroin and fentanyl, and then, as I stated earlier, we had 45 fentanyl deaths. So this is just a breakdown of where these deaths occur. It actually is where the injury occurred. A lot of these deaths occur in hospitals, and that information is not necessarily very beneficial to identifying the distribution. If your township or city is not on the list, then congratulations, you had no heroin deaths last year. And you see that Cincinnati, the big blue, all 5 districts represented, had 73 deaths. That large red burgundy slice of the pie is Norwood, which came in a strong second with 20. And so you can see that the problem does exist right here in Norwood, but it also spans multiple townships, multiple jurisdictions throughout Hamilton County. So that is it, just another type of heroin you see up there on the top, and then at the bottom is how it was packaged, and the top left is the actual heroin itself.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Captain Ron Wallace. He's a 29-year veteran of the Norwood Fire Division. He's in charge of the Bureau of Fire Safety and Investigations. He's also been a police officer part-time in Gulf Manor since 1988. So he's got a lot of our statistics are kind of going to go together. So as soon as we get this computer for him, we'll be ready to go.
Good evening. As he said, my name is Captain Ron Wallace, and I'm with the Norwood Fire Department. One of my responsibilities with the department is to oversee our EMS portion of the department. As part of that, we have a QA, which is a quality assurance, and as well as purchasing and supplies. So when I was putting my numbers together, one thing I want to point out, if you don't mind, I went back as far as 2012. One thing that doesn't count into this is if you went on the scene and the person is deceased at the scene. Okay? These are ones that we actually worked and attempted to save and did save in a lot of situations. So in 2012, we made a total EMS runs of 3,466. Of those, 99 were overdoses. So we pushed Narcan, which is the drug that counteracts an opiate overdose, 99 times, which roughly comes out to be around 2%. In 2013, we made 3,648 EMS runs. Strangely, the number of overdose runs went down to 73, which is around 3%. However, looking at a little further, like I said before, if the person was deceased when we arrive, we don't push the drug, and we don't work on them if they've already expired. So that number, could be a little bit higher than that.
Go.
Yeah. 2013. Again, I just talked about that one. 3,648 runs, 73 of which was overdoses. But then 2014 came. This kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. We made our actual run numbers, our EMS runs kind of slightly went down, but our overdose runs once again had gone up, and it went up considerably. And I think I figured it out, it's like a 50% increase or something like that between the 2 years. But once again, I want to point out, that's how many people we gave Narcan to. We went in the scene, they were still viable, they were still breathing maybe a few times a second or a few times a minute. They were unconscious, they were unresponsive, and we pushed the drug to bring them out of that opiate overdose. Okay, there's the increase, 55% between 13 and 14. Now, my next slide is going to throw you for a loop. 2015, so far, from January 1st to March 17th, we've made 667 EMS calls up until today. 67 of those have been overdoses. Okay? That's 10%. It jumped up that much. It went from a 3% or 2% up to a 10%. Just since, if this trend continues, okay, this is, I will point out, when I talked before, I take care of supplies and costs. That's another huge thing, huge factor that's come into play with us. 2012, that's how much money we spent total on Narcan that year. We purchased 124 doses, spent just under $2,000. 2013 to 14, we almost doubled. But looking at the dollar amount, also the price doubled. Supply and demand, right? Everybody's telling you that it's increasing and it's getting bigger and bigger. The company sees that, they're going to make more money, they raise the price.
Of course they do.
So that's what we're living with at this time. So looking at the monetary aspect of it, 124% increase from 2012 to 2014. That's how much our costs have gone up, as far as the EMS program in dealing with opiate overdoses. Okay, this is just what we were talking about before. Let me go to the next one. So far this year, this is what we spent in doses for this year, $2,654. That's only roughly, 67 days, something like that, in the year so far. If this continues, the minimum amount that we would spend is going to be $13,000 in Narcan alone. Our budget for EMS supplies is $28,000 a year. So roughly half of our budget is going to be spent on Narcan. And that's it. That's if the price stays where it's at now, at $35 a dose. Now, I was told that the governor is working out some type of a rebate program, up to like a $6 rebate. At this point, I'm not so sure we're going to qualify for that because we purchase our drugs from like the local hospitals, and they give us almost like a wholesale price anyway. So I don't know that we're even going to be eligible for that rebate. That might be more in line with maybe the doctor's offices or possibly even now that they're going to be selling it to the general public, you could get a rebate from it there. But I don't know that we'll benefit from that rebate at this point. I think that's all I got. And that's all I have from the fire department.
Hi, I'm Tom Fallon. My job is I'm in charge of the detectives in the drug unit, so got a lot of statistics. I don't think what everybody's told you, obviously, you know, we've got a huge problem here. Go ahead. And I want to thank the Norwood Drug and Alcohol Coalition for helping host this. We put a lot of time and effort in these. They helped me set up, Glenna helped me set up the sign-up stuff, and everybody's been so great to help me, so I want to thank them. And the stats are broke down in two ways. They're broke down from the uniformed police officers and the drug task force. This was, you can kind of see, these are the heroin possession charges. Obviously, you're seeing these are for the uniform guys. They're just stopping people. A lot of times it's coming back from Bond Hill, and you can see a pretty steady increase from 50 and 11 to 77 last year. That's just a felony possession of heroin where they had, you know, a tenth of a gram or whatever. And then the paraphernalia, which would be the needles, spoons, anything used to introduce the heroin to the body. And you can see 168 last year, a steady increase. And that's, go ahead. This is the drug unit's statistics, and these are broke down on the left is the heroin trafficking arrest. So like you see in 2010, 24, that's 24 people and 46 counts of trafficking. So they made 46 controlled buys from 24 defendants. You have to look at 2014 is, we were very short on police officers that year, so the statistics are a little low, and you can see by the statistics that we were able to get from the fire department and from the coroner's office that we obviously, 2014 was a really bad year. And you can see where the opiate arrest, and that's opiate trafficking charges, which is Percocets, Oxycontin, oxycodone. They were pretty high in 2010, 34 defendants, 55 charges, and you can see they steadily decreased. But the one thing that I thought, and I made the notation on the bottom, is in 13 we had our first trafficking in Suboxone, which was a strip that they use, and I think that'll be dealt with later in the program. But we had one defendant in 13, and then we had 4 arrests with 9 charges in 2014. But you can see the pills have gone way down, the trafficking in pills, the possessions. There's not that many from the drug guys because they were doing mostly covert stuff. And obviously the heroin is on an increase. And you can throw 14 out a little bit just because of the manpower issues. And you can see where we're at already in 2015, 12 defendants, 25 charges, and 2 possessions. This is our Norwood statistics. As of yesterday, we've had 3 heroin, and I called it heroin-involved deaths. We've had 52 non-fatals. We've started doing a different type of record keeping where when we respond, we're doing an actual overdose report, which is a non-criminal offense. I just talked to a family member. We're going to hit 4 tonight because we had one that's on life support from yesterday. Just over the weekend, and you can depends on how you look at Friday to Monday, or however, we had 9 fatal or non-fatal overdoses. I was in Grove City, Ohio, and on the drive back Friday for a meeting on heroin, there was one that happened, and as soon as I got in my office, we had 4 more. So, and we've had a couple already today, and it's getting bad. It's getting real bad. And this is our crime mapping software, and the ones in blue are multiple locations, but I want to kind of give you an idea of where these overdoses are happening. These are just all overdoses, and you can see going north on Carthage Avenue over there and going up to Montgomery Road in West Norwood, Maple, Elm, Allison area, but it's pretty much everywhere. And the blue ones are multiples, like I said. So it's just to kind of give you an idea of the crime mapping. 2014, these stats, we had our own stats that matched. I think we were off 1, right? We were off 1, but we had 20 heroin-involved deaths in Norwood, 3 other drug deaths. We had 1 case that my detectives were able to charge somebody with, and that was a tampering with evidence case. And before she went to trial, she died. So on a drug overdose in Cincinnati. So it's a very difficult dynamic to investigate because you have to work them backwards. very difficult, it's very troubling for my detectives. And this kind of repeats what Dr. Ralston said, 177 deaths. I did the math, and I'm not really that smart, but when Norwood has 11.3% of the overdose deaths in the county, and we only have 2.4% of the population, we got like 19,057 people to 804,500. I mean, you can tell by the map. It's a problem. So. And these are just, 2013, or 2013, we've got 9 heroin-involved overdose deaths. We did not keep the non-fatal statistics from that year, but I wanted you guys to be aware of that. I wanted to kind of cover, too, some of the things that apply, what the heroin is doing to our community. And there's some people that, this man, Matt Bakke, he's doing, as you can see on the bottom, 20 years in the Department of Corrections. He pled guilty. Go ahead. This guy was brazen, all to feed his heroin addiction. He was responsible for 8 to 10 home burglaries. He was breaking into people's house in the middle of the night while they're asleep, all over Norwood, but primarily up by St. Peter and Paul, Holy Trinity. And I actually interviewed this man with Detective Haywood, and he's like, yeah, I was really afraid I was going to get shot by a homeowner, but he didn't care. He was going into people's homes, stealing stuff right out of their bedrooms, purses off the counter. There's a person that Captain Wallace and I know very well, that his daughter is afraid to take a shower. She's afraid to do anything in her home because this guy violated their rights. So he's doing 20 years in the Department of Corrections. This is another one that got a lot of publicity. Christopher Worley, he pled guilty to 5 burglaries. He didn't do the middle of the night ones. He did during the day when everybody was at work. He would knock on the door. If nobody would answer, he'd go around back, kick in, and he got the nickname or the tag, Chicken Salad Burglar. I don't know if any of you guys saw that, but dogs were coming to him as he was breaking in. He'd get something out of the fridge and feed him, and then he would have his way. He pled guilty to 5 burglaries, and he got 20 years, and that's a significant sentence. You just don't see that. I mean, DJ will tell you don't see a whole lot of 20-year sentences on burglaries, but these people just didn't care. So, and then our last guy, this guy was Ron McCartan. He's got a whole laundry list. I knew Ron from when I was actively working the drug unit every day. But this was in November, December, and we had a special tactical unit that grabbed him. He was walking down right by Chipotle. I was actually working that night with a crowbar, but he would just pick a business along Montgomery Road that he didn't think had an alarm, forced entry. He took guns, he took computers, iPads, everything under the sun, but Ron's still in jail, and he's got 11 charges pending in Hampton County. Hopefully he'll get close to 20 also, but I've known him for years. It was all to feed his habit, and he, they just don't have any remorse. It's all to feed that heroin. So what are we doing as a police department? Everybody got one of these resource guides, and I want to thank Carol Baden. She's going to talk to, I think, next maybe. But Carol developed this, basically all of the numbers are in here. And it's everything, everybody should have one in their packets. Good. And I think the chief left, but what we're going to mandate, or the chief's going to mandate, is every person in Norwood that's arrested for any heroin or opiate possession or drug paraphernalia or anything, they're going to be given one of these. We can't force them to get help, but we can at least show them, hey, if you need it, this is what you got. And then I just got these back yesterday, but when we're doing the part B of this is a new program where a day or two after every overdose, non-fatal overdose, we're going to go to the families and to the overdose victim, give them one of these cards and say, if you need help, here you are. Check on them to make sure that they're doing okay. I actually stole this idea from the Coleraine Township Police Department that I learned at their summit. I can't really get into this too much, but we are on the forefront of a collaboration. It's going to hopefully come together and attack the whole issue in the tri-state. I'm involved, Dr. Ryan's involved, Carol's involved. So pay attention to that. It's coming real soon. That's all I have. Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Baden, who, as I mentioned, she's a nurse and she's the founder of the Community Recovery Project and the Southwest Ohio chapter of People Advocating Recovery. Carol is very passionate and very knowledgeable about everything in recovery.
I'd like to thank Tom and everybody here tonight. I think this is an amazing turnout for this topic. And, you know, if each one of you go out and you talk to 3 people about what you heard and what you learned, you've impacted that many more people in your communities. And that's what we need to do. I got into this about 2 years ago. And about a year ago, after being interrupted at work repeatedly with calls and questions about what I was doing, I quit my job, took this on full time. I run Community Recovery Project and People Advocating Recovery for Southwest Ohio. With Community Recovery Project that we started first, my husband and I developed this resource guide. It's on that we have a website. There's a PDF on the front page. You can go in, you can download it. He updates it about every 3 weeks. Currently, to help the medical and law enforcement communities, we're working on an app for that website. We'd like to get it off and running immediately, but it comes out of my grocery money. So I have 3 boys still at home. You know, for not too significant amount of money. We have friends who help us host the website, but the app will actually tell you how many beds are available in Hamilton County for people to get treatment, which is really important because so often what we've seen, Dr. Ryan, us and the ER doctor will tell you this, really nobody signed up for this, law enforcement didn't, medical didn't, the addicts didn't, their families didn't. And there's no direction, which is why we have the website. But when people go to the emergency room, oftentimes they're faced with physicians and nurses who really don't know what to do with them. Addiction is a disease that does not yet have a standard of care or a treatment plan. And I applaud law enforcement because over and over again what I am seeing is they're the ones developing the standard of care and treatment plan. So what they're doing is really raising the bar for the rest of us to get involved. I am very passionate about this topic, absolutely. I have all boys. I've seen friends, family members die from this. It is a manageable, long-term chronic disease, but it is manageable. And what we have done is we've created this stigma around this illness that people become isolated and they become less than human. And we treat them as if they are subhuman. And what we've done is create this environment where people in recovery need to be anonymous. People who aren't in recovery, who are in active use, can't get help. They can't find help, even for medical professionals. You know, law enforcement, they know they can't just lock them up. So some of the projects and things that we have done, immediately we did the website. We made that available to everybody. It's totally free. You know, go in there, look at the resources, hand it out, get it out there. It's not perfect. And I actually had a politician last week tell me, oh great, the best thing we have is something somebody developed out of their garage. And I looked at him and I said, then do me one better, because I've been doing this 2 years and I don't know where you've been. So I welcome any opportunities for feedback. Anybody who wants to jump in and get working on this, we are more than excited about that. With the medical institutes, we started giving them the resource information, getting it to the ERs. Primary doctors want it, pain management doctors want it, everybody wants help. Nurses as well. I can't tell you how many nurses have come to me and said, please get us information to give to these families. A lot of what we're hearing at these community efforts is family support is needed. We all know that this is a medical disease, but at the end of the day, the family is sick as well. This disease causes so many problems for so many families. There are family support groups, there's some listed on there. You can go onto the Nar-Anon website, and NA is Narcotics Anonymous, Nar-Anon is for the families. Al-Anon is a great resource. Not One More, Southeast Indiana is not a 12-step program, it's an awesome family support group. We want to try to get more of this into the community. I was meeting with some folks last week and we're talking about doing that. What more can we do for these families? And this is a great start because families need to get together and start doing these things on their own. We started a family support group on the west side of town because there wasn't one. So we said, well, why not? You know, we're not experts, but we got to do something. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now is there's so many people who feel the same way. Nobody's doing anything, but there is. There's a lot of good projects getting started. There's information out there. Don't hesitate to jump in and do whatever you can for your community. They say this affects 1 in 4 people in everyone's community. That's a lot. And there's no reason why all of us have to sit back and just say, well, wait for somebody else to do it because you just saw the statistics. Well, we all wait for somebody else to do it, somebody else dies. So I would just tell you that, you know, again, I'm not here to judge. I want people to get involved. Some of the big projects we've done, we're working with the Hamilton County Justice Center on some reentry information. The coroner's office is on board to get information to the people who are coming back out of the Justice Center. That's a huge risk for relapse. So we've also worked with schools on prevention and another big thing. And I would tell you, number one, if you don't do anything else, if you don't take anything else away from this, go home, look in your medicine cabinet, and take out your old opiate that's more Percocet, Vicodin, codeine cough syrup, get rid of it. Do you have a drug drop box?
In the lobby of the police department.
Lobby of the police department. Most police departments have a drug drop box. You take it there, you get rid of it. You are never going to use that Percocet. You had surgery 2 years ago and it's still sitting in your medicine cabinet, but your kids will, or your grandkids will. And they're going to go in and they're going to get it and they're going to use it and they're going to get hooked. That's what's happening. So there is no blame here, but I'll tell you, if you don't take anything else away, get rid of those old prescription medications. Very important. And that's why a lot of these robberies and break-ins started as well, because people were going after that. They knew that people were keeping the prescription medications. Another thing I wanted to touch on was, let's see, I like the idea of checking in on the family. You know, how awesome is that, that after someone ODs, that we have our police department going in to check on the families. There's so many resources available in this community, and I just encourage everybody to utilize those. We've worked with Dr. Ryan to get more Narcan, naloxone out into the community. It is such a big deal. I think it should be in every medicine cabinet. If not used for, if it's used for an opioid overdose, the heroin or Percocet or Vicodin, it can bring people back to life. It won't help for alcohol, it won't help for fentanyl, it's not going to help for anything else. If a person is breathing and has a weak heart rate, it can bring them back to life. And it's very simple to administer. A lot of people are hesitant because they say, well, I don't want to hurt them, or what if they have there's never been an allergy to this, there's never been an allergic reaction. If you give it and they're not out because of that, it's not going to hurt them. I keep one in my car, I keep one in my office, I keep one in my house. And I don't know why anyone would argue against that. I haven't quite figured that out yet.
I think the argument is said that it allows the patient with addiction somewhat of a safety blanket, and that does not statistically proven to be the case. In fact, what happens is if they get enrolled to the specific point, I don't mean to hijack.
No.
If the patients end up with a naloxone prescription, they usually got it from somewhere, meaning a physician, office, treatment center, program, and they get enrolled into treatment, and they have actually a lower rate of overdose if they have a prescription for medication. So the statistic is actually completely backwards and for a specific reason. It is not a safety blanket. They don't go out and use more. I have to have this discussion every day with my patients.
spreading naloxone all over the city, quite honestly, because I think that it would save lives every single day. So also there's grant programs. You can go to CCAT has a program where they can get you a prescription or a naloxone kit, and also the Cincinnati Exchange Project. They have the mobile van. They give out naloxone scripts. They're out of kits right now. And that is a problem too. A lot of the funding for the kits has gone out, but you can still get a prescription. In the state of Ohio, as a third party, you can have a script written to you. If you have someone in your life that you're worried about and you think they might OD and you want to get the naloxone for them, you can have a script written to you, go to your pharmacy, it goes under your insurance. So you might just pay a copay for that, and that is totally fine in the state of Ohio. They have very lenient legislation, I guess, was put in place last year for that.
Some of the insurers are not quite on board yet, but that's the state statute that you're allowed to do. That's what governs that. There's some uptake issues with the insurers, but the answer is, if you're a family member and you're at that level of concern and it's $50 or $100, it's worth it. So, I mean, that's my perspective.
Agreed. I think there was one other thing I was going to touch on, just, again, with faith-based communities and schools, get involved, talk to people. If you want to talk to me about how to start community outreach, I was asked after running a community recovery project for a year, I was asked to start people advocating recovery for Southwest Ohio. There's so much need for this type of community involvement. Why? Because we need the community buy-in. Honestly, this is where we start getting our momentum for the shift of change and letting people know that if you have an addiction, it's okay to be in recovery. We've made it all these different obstacles to be in recovery. We're making it really difficult by stigmatizing this disease. So once we start removing these obstacles and saying, yeah, I can have Narcan in my home, and I can do these other steps to make people feel like it's okay, then we open up, our community is going to be amazing. And I thank you all for coming out tonight to listen to this.
So our next speaker will be Dr. Teresa Keller. She is from Gateways, which is Recovery Center. She is the director of their medication-assisted treatment program. She's also a family physician with addiction certification.
Hello, can you all hear me? I have some wonderful slides here that I don't have actually. So I'm the medical director at Gateways Recovery Center, which is in Clinton. I've been there for about 2 years. Prior to that, I did primary care with addiction in my office as a private practitioner. So I've been doing that since about 2005 or 6 or so. I became certified in Suboxone therapy in 2006, and then board certified in addiction 2.5 years ago. What they asked me to talk about was treatment, but also gateways. So I'm going to do a little bit of both, and hope you'll bear with me for my lack of slides. I just found out about this yesterday or the day before. So the goal of treatment is actually to reduce death, also to reduce disease, and also to reduce loss of life in that, we have criminals that are now in jail because of their drug use, okay? So that's the overall goal of treatment. There are several treatment modalities, and what I want to talk about is behavioral treatment and also medication treatment. At Gateways, we do both, and the behavioral treatment can come in the form of long-term residential treatment, which we don't do, but also outpatient treatment, which we do. So in general, when we have somebody that is referred to our facility, they undergo an assessment, and then depending on what recommendations are made, they either do intensive outpatient treatment alone, or they do that with medication-assisted treatment. What we do know from recent studies is that behavioral treatment in conjunction with medication therapy improves life and recovery by over 50%, whereas if you're looking at it without medication, you're looking at less than 10% recovery rates. So medication has been a huge advancement in the treatment of addiction. The medicines that are generally used can either be maintenance treatment like methadone or buprenorphine, which is part of Suboxone, It can also be treatment that would include like Vivitrol or naltrexone, which is a blocking agent. In general, when I have somebody come to my office, I would say most people want to be on Suboxone therapy or Subutex, which is the Suboxone without the naltrexone in it, or naloxone. Treatment usually is about 6 months to 2 years of medication, and then after treatment with the Suboxone, I typically, depending on risk factors, I transition people to a blocking agent for another 2 years. So you're looking at least 4 years, if not longer. There are some some thought that perhaps some patients actually require long-term opioid therapy, and there are people who are on maintenance therapy, either Suboxone or methadone for 10 years or longer. And you'll see that more at the methadone maintenance treatment centers. Let's see. So gateways, typically our patients stay with us for about 2 years, and I would say that since July of 2014, we've had over 120 patients come in with opioid addiction. Also, we're seeing an increase in addiction in pregnant women, and so far within the last 2 months, we've had 14 pregnant women come into treatment with us. Gateways does have a working relationship with a lot of other therapy places in town. We work with the Good Sam Hope program, which is for pregnant women, and oftentimes what they'll do is they'll send them to us for intensive outpatient treatment and also medication therapy. We also work with First Step, which is a residential treatment program for pregnant women, and we work with Bethesda, which does, they do office-based detox or ambulatory detox. In general, when a patient comes in who's acutely using heroin, the treatment plan is to either detox them and start Suboxone or detox them and put them on a blocking agent. The detox can either be in our facility, as long as it's not methadone, and we do a 2-day detox with Suboxone. If you want to do a detox without and do ambulatory detox, then that's why we send somebody either to Bethesda or to Falmouth, where they do an inpatient detox. The other thing that we have started doing is distributing Narcan to our patients, to the family members of our patients. So we actually have kits available which we will give out to our patients. You can use a prescription and send them to a pharmacy, but that actually, in my experience, has been quite difficult. Many pharmacies don't stock it. They don't have the kits available. There's no manufacturer of the kits as of yet. Most kits are made by grant funding, and then some pharmacies just don't want to deal with handing it out. So that has been a bit difficult for us. And also, just so you know, that you can use Narcan for fentanyl overdose. And I think that's about it for treatment from my perspective, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Josh Stockson. He is the pastor of Vineyard Central Church over in West Norwood, or here in West Norwood. He's also going to speak on behalf of the Norwood Drug and Alcohol Coalition, which is a place where you can get involved. I think the problem has been laid out here pretty clear, and Josh can give you some tips on how to get involved.
Good evening. My first funeral as a pastor here in Norwood was for a neighbor whose life was wrecked by heroin, and he actually was electrocuted trying to steal copper. So for me, this became personal very quickly, and became something that I recognized that being a pastor where I'm at in Norwood is going to involve this issue. And so I'm really happy to be part of the Norwood Drug and Alcohol Coalition. What we're hoping to do is prevent things like that from ever happening. So it's great to have treatment, it's great to have law enforcement, but ideally we get that before they ever have to get that far. If you think of what heroin does, it essentially hijacks your brain. So if you think of a plane hijacking, you definitely want to keep someone from hijacking a plane ever, right? You don't want that, you don't even get to that point of having a plane hijacked. You want to keep the hijacker off the plane entirely. And so a big purpose of the Drug and Alcohol Coalition is prevention, trying to keep the hijack from ever happening. Because once that hijack happens, it overtakes the same part of your brain that regulates hunger. And so if you have a choice between food or drugs, sometimes people choose drugs. And they steal and they break into people's homes because that desire for drugs is just as strong as their hunger. So prevention is huge, and it's something that we as a coalition are seeking to work on. As Deb mentioned at the beginning of the program tonight, we've been gathering now for going about 3 years, and the coalition is a cross-section of the entire Norwood community. So the schools are represented, nonprofits are represented, just average citizens are represented, the police department has been involved. We really see our role as one of equipping the entire community to get on board and to get involved. And as a coalition, we definitely believe in both prevention and treatment. We know that we have to help those who are already involved, as well as prevent others from becoming involved. But as I just said, it's definitely preferable to prevent someone from ever getting to that point. So we are particularly focusing on prevention, especially among the youth of our city. Inside your folder, there's an overview of the Pride Survey, which is a survey given to students in the schools here in Norwood from 7th to 12th grade. And this is a self-reporting survey where students report their own experience of drugs and alcohol. It's anonymous, so no one's knowing who they are or following up specifically with them. So it's self-reported. But one encouraging thing, there's been a lot of discouraging information tonight. One encouraging thing is that 70% of young people in middle and high school claim not to be actively using drugs or alcohol. Now again, that's self-reported. Not everyone takes the survey, and yet that is an encouraging place to start. Even if they're not telling the truth, the fact that they would want to lie shows that they know that this is probably not a good thing. And that sort of perception is also important. You'll see there definitely is use issues though. 16 students reported using prescription pain medications that weren't prescribed to them, so the whole issue around prescription drugs is an issue with students. I know the local Walgreens is aware of that and started taking certain things more seriously in terms of putting stuff behind the counter and recognizing things that kids were targeting for over-the-counter drugs. At least 5 students reported using heroin 3 times a week or more. So even among the student population, there is heroin use. And you can see the other statistics there that gives you a snapshot of where the student population is at in Norwood. As a coalition, we've looked at measurable ways to address this issue, and we've started with three goals. The first is to increase the age of first use. So this might seem like not a big deal, but as has been alluded to, the younger you begin using drugs, the more damage to your brain. So the older we can keep kids from experimenting with drugs, the more we protect their brain, and the better chance we give them of making better choices. So increasing the age of first use is one of our goals. Our second goal is to increase parent perception that drug use is wrong. So obviously, it's also been alluded to, this is a family issue. A lot of this is family dynamics where drug use is rampant, either in the immediate family or the extended family. Kids are exposed to it, and it's seen as an acceptable thing, a normal thing, something that they're less likely to question or resist. So increasing the parent perception that drug use is wrong is one of our goals. And a somewhat obvious goal, but an important one, is to decrease the deaths in Norwood. Obviously, 20 deaths in 2014 alone, which is disproportionately high for a city our size. As we brainstormed ways to achieve these goals, we've identified 4 key strategy areas. The first is to promote resources and improve communication. As you've heard tonight, there are a lot of resources available. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't aware of what those are or how to access them. So one of our strategies is to improve that communication and to promote resources as we become aware of them. Our second strategy is to highlight and nurture positive teen voices. So as we mentioned, a majority of teens in Norwood are not currently using drugs or alcohol in an abusive way. So that's a good thing to build on, and there's been several team-led events to try and focus on that and highlight that. There was a summit here in the gym a while back where the upperclassmen hosted it for the lowerclassmen and kind of shared some of the things they'd learned about drug use. So we're trying to leverage those teens who aren't using, who see that it's not a good thing, to share that message with their peers. Our third strategy is to promote and develop youth activities. It's not enough to just say no. You have to have something to say yes to. You have to have something to be excited about. I think one of the main causes for a lot of this is just boredom and not having something to really engage somebody's life around. And that's definitely true with teens. If they don't have something to engage them with, drugs become a lot more attractive of an option. So there are a lot of good things happening in Norwood, so we're trying to highlight the good things that are happening, the after-school programs. There's a great slate of after-school programs that the schools offer, but then also trying to develop and nurture new programs as well. One of those that's taking place in our neighborhood is an after-school program at the community center, where we're just trying to gather teens who are actually younger than teens that are just roaming around the neighborhood looking for something to do. So we're looking to develop additional activities. The fourth strategy is to offer training and education. As also has been alluded to, there's a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions, a lot of stereotypes when it comes to substance abuse. So we're working to change that by attending trainings ourselves, helping facilitate events like this evening, and promoting other events in the area. There are a lot of people working on this. We're not alone. There's lots of groups, again, that have been represented tonight that are working on this, that are doing great work, and we're hoping to connect and plug into what is already happening. So again, I think that there's been a lot of kind of hard stuff to take in, and it's easy to feel kind of defeated and like, well, what do we do? It seems overwhelming. And so part of what we want to offer tonight is there is a lot we can do. There's a lot of positive steps we can take as a community to address this. And so I'm just going to offer four quick suggestions. The first is that we need to recognize that this is not a hopeless situation. We do all have the power to make a difference. There are ways that we can interrupt a young person's interest in trying drugs and alcohol. Caring adults, volunteering, involvement in school activities, involvement in church and community activities, all have the potential to shield young people and redirect them towards something positive. We can also focus on assets, not deficits. So it's easy to focus on a problem and just try and keep attacking that problem, throwing more and more money at a problem. Another approach is to really focus on assets. What is good about our neighborhood? What can we beef up and improve that's already good and make it even better? And again, I think youth activities is one of those areas where we have a lot of assets already. How do we continue to build upon that and get kids plugged into that? The third thing you can do right now is talk to your own children, your neighbors, and your relatives. Again, part of the stigma there is that people don't want to talk about it until it becomes personal. We're not being proactive enough in talking to our own families, our own neighbors, letting them know what the risks are, what the dangers are. The neighbor that I buried, someone told him he was dealing with chronic pain from his job. Someone told him, well, you know what, heroin's good for that. So again, there's an education piece here where people are being told things that just are true and ultimately can lead to their death. So talking to our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones, and not shaming ourselves or others for getting help. Again, recognizing there's a disease element to this. It's not all just choice. These aren't just bad people who make bad choices. Part of it, again, is a hijacking where they no longer have a choice. They may have made some bad choices initially, but that doesn't make them bad people through and through. Once the drug takes over, they no longer have their choice anymore. Which leads me to my last thing is, one thing we can do right now is to refuse to demonize and avoid people who struggle with addiction. And I think this is a difficult one because it's easy to just kind of point the finger, to blame, to say, well, those people, and I think that's something we have to avoid if we really want things to change, because as long as we say it's out there and it's someone else, we're not going to own it. And any one of us could become an addict, depending on our life circumstances, depending on what could happen. So to really not to demonize folks that are struggling with addiction, but to choose to love them, to reach out to them, to connect them to resources. There is help available, and we can be people who bring that help. So lastly, I encourage you in your folder, you have a postcard like this, an oversized postcard. Everybody pull that out for me. Grab your folder, pull this out. Wave it in the air, let me hear some noise. All right. So this is the kind of thing where we need everyone on board, all hands on deck. There's no one in this room who can't help in some way. One thing that we've identified as a lack right now in our coalition is business involvement. We just heard how businesses are being broken into, and yet businesses are not on board with contributing money and resources to this issue. If you know or own a Norwood business, talk to them. Say, hey, this directly affects you. We need financial resources for things like these kits. We need financial resources to help do prevention. We really could use more investment from the business community to get this off the ground. But there's also, if you're not involved with business, there's other ways to get involved. So on the back of this card, there's boxes you can check about being involved. If you want to be involved in one of these strategy areas of the coalition, or you want to be involved in a different way, if you've got your own idea, mark other and write that in. But we're going to send this back to you, so put your name and address on it. And we're going to send this back to you. We're going to take the information so we can also follow up, but we're going to send it back to you to remind you in a few weeks of what you've committed to doing. So please take a minute to fill that out and consider the ways that each of us can help save a life. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. If we can prevent somebody from getting to that point, we could actually save someone's life. So thank you.
If everybody's got their questions written down, pass them. We'll get to that next. Our last speaker, one of the things I was talking to Deb, she's hiding in the back there, but we wanted to provide hope to people that there is a way to get out of this problem. There's good people that have learned and have gotten through this problem. And I'd like to introduce our last speaker. It's Alex Shearing. He is he's a husband, he's a father, he's a college grad. He's also a dynamic guy that is in recovery from this disease, and he's doing really good. And he's really, I'm just glad to have him here. So.
I'm going to put this podium in between us. Do I have to use this? Can you guys hear me?
No. You don't have to. No, you have to use it for the TV.
I just hate microphones.
You have to use it so they can hear you on the...
Oh, what a bummer. Okay, like Tom, I met Tom at the first PAR meeting with Carol. I was just trying to figure out where I met you originally because I've seen you a few times now. But we met at the PAR meeting or whatever, and People Advocating Recovery, first of all, if you get a chance to go to their meetings, go to it. It's a super, super passionate organization for recovery, which I agree with pretty much everything you said, which is crazy. Most of the time I don't agree with everything. This is a passionate subject. There's two different views here. Either it's a disease or it's not. I'm here to tell you that it is. I'm here to tell you that it's a fact. I'm here to tell you that there is no gray area to this anymore. Like they said, I just became a father 7 months ago, and I used to be a firefighter. I know Chief Walls from Coleraine, and he didn't know I had a kid, and I showed him a picture of my child, and he said, you know, that should be motivation for you to not do drugs. And I'm here to tell you that sometimes my brain still tells me I need to do drugs with or without my child. And it takes a lot of work to not do them, if that makes sense. I hit a lot of meetings. I'm in a 12-step program. It saved my life. I believe in it. It's what's working for me right now. I've tried methadone, Suboxone, and everything else. I had the urge to use drugs no matter what they were. And I totally agree with it not being a choice. I guess I hate to say this, but I used alcohol like a regular person, if that makes sense. I used alcohol like a regular person through college. I partied. I got good grades. I graduated. I got a degree. I smoked marijuana. I did all these recreational drugs that a lot of people do without any problems. And then I hurt my back on the job as a firefighter, and they put me on Percocet 5 milligrams. And I'll never forget the first time I took it, because the first time I took it, I felt like it's more than euphoria. It's a hijacking of your brain. It's a really good way to put it. It changed how stuff fired upstairs for me. And it became the one sole purpose I lived, and I chased it really, really hard. And I couldn't stop. The only way I stopped was, treatment for me was jail. I'm open about that. I got a big time felony in Indiana. So over there too, which is crazy, where you guys don't lock people up for overdoses. In Indiana, it's different. If you get an overdose, the first thing you're gonna see is handcuffs. You're not gonna see people with resources, guys. That's amazing to me. But jail for me is what stopped me or whatever. But it took about 3 years, about 2.5 years worth of chasing pills, oxycodone, Broxycodone, you name it, everything that I could get into my hands. And then it turned into heroin when the pills started to get harder to get, to be honest with you. They were really easy to get for a long time and really just not that expensive, I guess you could say. And then eventually it became really hard to get, really expensive, and I went to heroin. And going to heroin was not like this huge decision that people make it out to be. It's just, it makes sense. You're living for one sole purpose, and that is to get high and not be sick. You know, and I stand here and I talk to you guys about this today, and I think back to like how my mind was working back then. It's totally different than what I think today. And what I thought back then was literally not me. It was a lifeless body, a shell of a person who didn't understand life in general. I missed something growing up. I'm not sure what it was. I'm here to tell you too that like it can be fixed. There is hope. I sit in a room full of people almost on a nightly basis, if I can, 4 times a week. Now that I got a kid, it's really busy. But you know, 4 nights a week I sit in a room or a church basement with a bunch of people just like me that are recovering, that aren't using drugs, they don't drink, they don't take any mood altering chemicals, and they're happy people. You know, when I walked in my job, you know, I just had a lady walk up to me today at work and told me she was a recovering alcoholic. And for anybody that doesn't know it, an alcoholic is the same thing as an addict. Addicts and alcoholics are the same. It's just a drug of choice difference. That's all it is. There's 2 different fellowships out there, and the reason for that is because there's a difference in seeking behavior, if that makes sense. You know, I never chased alcohol like I chased dope. I chased dope like it was, I can't tell you guys what it feels like. Because if you've never experienced it, you're not going to understand it. But it's just when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you think about is how can I get my dope today? And when I hear about the burglaries and everything and the crimes, like that's just not, it's not normal behavior for normal people. And once your brain gets hijacked, there is no turning back. You're stuck. And until there's some kind of intervention, which would be treatment. I was really lucky that Indiana does lock you up, but in Indiana they got a really great treatment program in jail. It's called JCAT. I went through it. It changed my life. I learned how to think. I learned how to, my behavior. Somebody's talked about behavioral therapy. I totally agree with that. They taught me how to, you know, I changed everything. I literally changed everything. I don't talk to any of my friends from back in the day except for one. He's a doctor. He lives in Wichita. It's the only reason I talk to him. Because when I had my baby, I was freaking out for the first 4 months or so, and I call him every night about 2 in the morning. You know, it's a total change in everything that happens upstairs, and it's really simple to explain that you chase it with everything you've got. And when that intervention happens, which can be a Narcan, I'm so glad I heard that finally, because that is the biggest argument against Narcan right now, that it gives some kind of security blanket. But I'm here to tell you that when I was using dope, not once did I ever use dope and think, oh, I got Narcan, or somebody will have Narcan, I'll be safe. That's not how you think. That's just not how the brain works. I'm going to use this amount of dope, and I just got an email today from the DEA. Fentanyl being laced into heroin and everything is killing people on a regular basis and everything. And, you know, the Narcan is saving lives. It's that simple, and it's a great intervention time or point for us to get treatment into somebody's life. People talk about rock bottom a lot. For me, this is what I'm telling you here is out of experience. Rock bottom for me is death. There's nothing stopping me from going to the bar on the way home and starting all this all over again. The reason I don't is I have a choice today because I'm empowered with some tools and some people in my life that, you know, is positivity. It's that simple. But, you know, rock bottom is death for most people, but what you can do is manufacture a bottom, okay? So in other words, there's a difference between, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, you got medicinal therapy, you got Suboxone, methadone, all that stuff. I tried all that stuff. It didn't work for me because I chased that just like I did dope. It didn't work for me. What worked for me was 6 months in a county jail, dried out, saying either you're going to do this or you're going to go to prison for 10 years. And my parents didn't bail me out this time. That's what worked for me. And while I was there, I got educated. That's all it was. But for me, the difference is when you go to jail, you're forced. When you get into medicinal treatment, you might not be ready for treatment, but it helps you along the way and keeps you alive. When I first got into recovery, I was against medicinal treatment. And the reason I was because I was doing the whole non-medicinal thing. But then I kind of opened my mind a little bit and saw that people were dying at such an alarming rate. And I was losing so many friends. You know, the 16 people that I graduated with out of the program I was in, 6 of them are already dead. And it's only been 3 years. I've only been doing this for 3 years, not long at all. So, and these are normal kids just like me. I mean, 2 of them I graduated high school with and they ended up in jail with me. You know, and these were normal people. Normal people. And like you said, I mean, it can affect anybody. That is the truth. I don't know how many times I've had people approach me and say, hey, I know that you suffer from addiction and everything else. I don't suffer from addiction. I did. I used to. I used to suffer really bad, but like I thrive from it today. And that's just a fact. I help people every day. People that come up to me and say, listen, my son's struggling with this. Can you reach out to him? Absolutely. You know, I reach out to him. He comes to a meeting. His life is totally changed 6 months later. And I've seen it happen with so many people. And the problem that we're having right now is that it is anonymous. But I respect my fellowship, if that makes sense. There's traditions there, so I respect it. I don't put their name out there or anything like that. But, you know, it is available. And there's a resource guide that Carol came up with, they talked about earlier, that is superb. There's so many things in that. And all the fellowships have websites. So if you have somebody that's struggling with it, there's plenty of people to reach out to. You just have to go do it, you know what I'm saying? And people don't want to talk about it. I know people don't want to talk about it. I know for the longest time, when I was in jail, my mom never came to see me while I was in jail. She was so ashamed of who I was as a person. And the crazy part is my mom suffers from the same disease, and she didn't know it. She does today, and she's in recovery too, which is really cool. But the cool part about it is, when we got out, we'll come to like Thanksgiving dinner with my family or something, and we'll talk about, I've had using thoughts, right? There's some days where I want to use drugs. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's just how my brain tells me to deal with life. You know, if my kid's screaming and he's teething and all this other stuff's going on and my girlfriend's screaming and it's 2 in the morning, I gotta be up at 6 a.m. and yada yada. I gotta fly out to New York tomorrow morning for work, and I'm gonna go home tonight and it's gonna be hell on earth, I promise. And tonight my brain's gonna tell me that if I just use, I don't have to feel that way. And I understand that if I pick a phone up, call my sponsor, call a friend, whatever it may be, I can get myself out of that situation. But that's something that somebody's actively using that's never been introduced to treatment doesn't know. All they know is that using is the answer, and that's the end of the discussion. And if I have to break into a house to do it, that's fine. And they don't feel remorse immediately. It takes time to feel those emotions again. That's the hardest part about recovery. It's not only really hard to get into, but once you're there, getting clean is not hard. Staying clean is really hard. That's the hardest part, is that once you're there, all that stuff comes back. All the stuff you've ever done is back in your face again. And you were making really bad decisions for a long time. So I don't know. I know there's a lot of questions coming up too, and I want you guys to know that if anybody needs, last time I was at one of these, somebody asked how to get a sponsor or a few specific questions. Ask away. And if you have personal questions, you can't offend me. I don't know, is there anybody else in here that's an addict? Anybody willing to raise their hand? Yes, that's awesome. Now I don't feel alone. Thank you. But you can ask questions. You're not going to offend me. I don't take anything really too personal. I'm a drug addict. I've shot dead before, so there's not really too much that offends me. But if you have questions, or if you have somebody struggling with it that you need somebody to be reached out to for some hope, give me their number. I'll call them right here on the spot, and we'll talk to them and see if we can give them some help. But other than that, I appreciate you guys having me out again, and I'll come out anytime I can to help out. That's all I got.
So we're going to move on to the questions. Glenna, if you want, do you have them kind of organized for us? Do you want to read them for me?
Sure. Could you do like a panel?
Yeah, well, I'll take the microphone.
Okay, how's everyone doing? All right, so we have some great questions. Those of you who we can't get to questions because of time, we can follow up with you if you let us know who you are. The Drug and Alcohol Abuse Prevention Coalition that Josh mentioned, and that is in support of this event this evening. We meet every Tuesday at 1 o'clock at the Norwood Health Department. It's a great cross-section of people, so we would love to have more people involved in those specific strategies. First Tuesday of every month, 1 o'clock, Norwood Health Department. You are welcome and encouraged to join us. Okay, we have a statement first, which I thought was nice. I am so thankful for the Norwood police and paramedics for being there for me and my family when my son overdosed. Seems as if the pharmaceutical companies have no reason to help with this effort. What can we do to help stop pharmaceutical misuse?
Who wants that?
I mean, there's kind of two questions or statements. Number one, pharmaceutical companies are in business to make money. Don't anybody be confused, ever. That's true. And that's just the way it is. We can take some solace in the fact that they are seeing this as an issue that they could potentially make some profit for, and they will do the research associated with that to potentially provide us with more therapies, maybe. The second question was how to stop pharmaceutical misuse, like the prescription drug.
Is there anything we can do to help pharmacies not be able to do the wide pain medications?
I mean, I think that that's a really long question that I probably can't answer tonight. It's a complex set of prevention and treatment and law enforcement. So it's kind of the same question we're talking about overall, which is it takes a multifaceted approach to reduce the overall societal burden of pharmaceutical overuse. I guess that's the best way I can put that. Any better description you would give than that? It's not just us.
Well, and a lot of the boards are now enacting, and there are laws being enacted to reduce prescribing authority.
Right. Yeah. There are multidisciplinary committees, state board pharmacy and medicine that I actually sit on. They're trying to address this at a reasonable level so that we allow physicians the ability to still treat patients, but then kind of force their hands on the educational component as well as help them understand what's probably appropriate. But we need the communities to also participate in that behavior. I guess there is kind of an answer, which is to help us understand as your clinician, your physician, what you're actually looking for when you're looking for my foot hurts. That may mean not that I need Percocet, which is also almost commonly the answer, it unfortunately is, but that I maybe need physical therapy, or maybe I'm actually depressed or something else. So it's a really complex question. Sorry to not be able to answer it completely.
Well, can we say one more thing another?
It just struck me while you were speaking about that. I can't remember her name. Carol mentioned getting rid of your old prescription drugs, and that's huge. In addition to that, when she was speaking, I was thinking about if you have a family member who passes away from cancer, you need to get rid of that oxycodone fast. Take it to the police department. Put Dawn dishwashing liquid inside the container. Do what you got to do to get rid of that. Okay.
And I'm going to ask a question for the mayor because he signs my paycheck, and I'm going to make sure that we give him the respect. I'm kidding, I've known him for years. And this is for Dr. Ralston. He was saying, is there any numbers on how people are dying with, is it mostly like 90% needles? Because I know we just had an OD last week, or 2 weeks ago, they were actually smoking it. So you want to kind of address what the most common way that they're dying from the abuse, what way are they getting it in their system?
Well, certainly I don't have all of those numbers compiled, if you will. I could look into it, but there's some caveat to any numbers that we would produce like that. Just because we find a needle on the scene doesn't mean that was the route of administration at that time. What I'm looking at is what's going on in the bloodstream and not the route of administration. Certainly, I will say we see lots of needles, lots of evidence of intravenous drug use in these heroin deaths. Oftentimes, we don't find any evidence of intravenous drug abuse. And that may be that the scene has been cleaned. We oftentimes walk in and this is the cleanest that house has been in many years because the people don't want anybody to suspect as to what's going on. But certainly those numbers, even if I had them, would be slightly skewed. I will say that there is a large percentage that involve intravenous use.
We have time for two. Maybe.
Keep going. We got.
My son became addicted to his pain pills. He tells us he just stopped taking them one day. We believe he's actually using them. How do we get him some help or get into detox?
So something that I forgot to mention is that if your son is willing, then you can call up an addiction treatment center and kind of go that route. But if they're not willing, there are actually laws in Kentucky and Ohio, Casey's Law, which I'm not sure if you're all familiar with it, but it allows for the involuntary commitment of an adult, so somebody over 18. What it requires is that at least I know in Kentucky, and I imagine it's about the same in Ohio, is that you have to go to the courthouse, get the paperwork, and you have to have 2 independent evaluations of your child, adult child. One from a physician, and the other can be a physician or a therapist that says that he or she is a threat to themselves. And then you go before the court, and they can be involuntarily committed to treatment. I believe in Kentucky that generally they have to do at least 2 months of inpatient treatment. In Ohio, from what I've read, it can be any spectrum of what the judge decides to do. The downside, a couple of downsides. One, whoever petitions the court is responsible for all costs, including treatment and court costs. And the other downside is that if they don't do the treatment, then they go to jail. But that might not be bad.
Okay. I recently read an article from the Dayton Daily News that stated in Montgomery County the average age of arrest for drugs was 32 and the age for heroin average overdose death is 42. Is that consistent in Norwood? I was surprised that that age seemed higher than I would expect.
Unfortunately, I can't answer that.
From Norwood Health Department.
Yes, I actually work for the health department here in Norwood. My name's Chandra. And Norwood has its own vital records. So anybody who is declared dead in Norwood, we get those death records. And just by virtue of that, I'm nosy and I like to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. Our average death for our adults with heroin or polypharmacy is about 42. It really is about the same here. And it's mostly men.
Thank you.
What are the statistics for repeat overdose runs?
I don't have the numbers, but I can tell you that if I did have numbers, they would be very high. I know addresses when they come out over my phone that we're going to, we know that that's what it's going to be when we go there. So yeah, it's again, I don't have the percentages or something like that. I've never really looked at it from that angle, but I see a lot of, when I do the quality assurance and stuff, I see a lot of the same names and same addresses of people.
I mean, I would just agree with the chief that, working in the emergency department every day, I've definitely seen patients come in sometimes twice and 3 times a day. And so it's not just the address, which may be multiple residents at that address, but it's actually individual patients who have multiple overdoses per day, which is extraordinarily frustrating for an emergency physician who, prior to me moving into the treatment realm, I had no outlet to address that. I just said, sorry, and that's terrible. But that's the case at the current time.
And there's a young man, he's probably in his late 30s in Norwood, that actually when our officers would have contact with him, it was kind of badge of honor how many times he's been Narcan, and he was over 25. And he's got extensive criminal history, so repeating is happening.
Okay, it's a good thing you're close. Is the treatment center inpatient that's coming to Norwood, and where will it be located?
So it is outpatient only, but we are coordinating with inpatient detox. As I stated, I'm working with Mercy Health to discuss that thoroughly. I will not make any promises from them. That's a larger discussion. But we will provide both intensive and less intensive outpatient therapy and coordinate up and down the spectrum with both inpatient, residential, and then potentially with PCPs. We're going to attempt to provide the whole continuum as designed by some individuals involved in the group. And then it is in the Central Park area, next to or near the American Home Mercy Health and that portion of the facility.
To the family who is struggling with a son who's using pain pills and they're not sure that he's off of them, Addiction Services Council offers some amazing services for family and individual counseling, and they'll do intervention. Casey's Law is awesome, but there are a lot of obstacles to Casey's Law. Not everybody has the money to pay for treatment for their kid. Intense outpatient medical assisted therapy are great options. You know, any recovery is good recovery, and I think the Greater Cincinnati Addiction Services Council, you got the number in your pamphlet, is a great way to start, and they're a referral service. They will go out and they'll find the best match for you. So make sure that that's an option.
Captain Wallace brought something up, and I don't know if Dr. Ryan, Dr. Keller can address this. Is there a downside to the Narcan? He was talking about how after 40 minutes or something that it can reverse, and a lot of times they're kind of running into people refusing transport. And I know that's something big picture that I think they're looking at statewide, where maybe you guys can address that.
So depending on the patient, the Narcan does wear off, and so once that wears off, the receptors are still full or become full again because the opiate is still in the system, and so they can overdose again, essentially. So sometimes repeated doses are necessary. In general, we recommend for our patients when we hand out Narcan that if you use it at home, first dial 911. Obviously, the patient who's overdosed isn't using the Narcan, okay, because they've overdosed. But the family member should perform CPR, rescue breathing, call 911, use a Narcan, and then they should be transported to the emergency room in case they need additional Narcan doses. And then you can address what you do with them after they come.
So that the other side of that is that we can't hold them against their will unless there's risk to is somewhat intentional or identified as intentional, and so neither can they or neither can they. And so the protocol that the chiefs of police have asked me to write is going to be a suggestion of transport, because unfortunately you can't really, unless they have a legal charge or something else, but if it's just an overdose, unless I'm missing something, you can't force them. And it's really dangerous because of all the chemicals it's being cut with currently. Fentanyl is actually a shorter acting than heroin, so it's not as big of a deal, but when they cut it with longer acting stuff, especially pills, people do inject pills, which sounds weird, but they do. And they put the long-acting morphine, et cetera, in it. They can be down for quite some time. And if I'm observing them in the emergency department, then I can do stuff about it. I put people on Narcan drips to some extent, depending on what they're on.
That is all of our questions. I would like to thank the speakers, everybody, for coming. We had a great group. I'd like to thank everybody from Norwood. I would like to encourage everybody to send their card in that Josh talked about. Get involved. One of the things is we've met with the law enforcement end. We're not arresting ourselves out of this problem. We're not preventing it. We're not educating enough. It's going to take a team effort. And that's why we wanted to educate everybody here today to kind of define the problem. So thanks for everybody for coming out, and we appreciate it.